Uh, oh, thank you. It's just the art of getting your mirrors in a reflecting telescope, specifically a Newtonian reflecting telescope, aligned so that light uh, is coming in, hitting the mirror in the center, and coming up to your secondary mirror, bouncing off into your eyepiece, and everything is nicely centered. And in order to do that, there's a lot of different ways to get that done. Some of them are rather simple and basic, but most common way to do it is with a laser collimator right here. I've got one type here. We can see it's got a little cutout in the side, which has a screen in it. There's a hole in it through which a laser is presented. So if I turn it on, we've got laser on the screen behind me. Let's see, there it is for Zoom people. So we just have a nice little laser. It's essentially a laser flashlight that goes through a hole in a plate that's oriented at a 45-degree angle. And the plate's got some, generally speaking, some matting or some weight and some grid work or whatever. Different lasers have different kind of things. Here's one that I adjusted for somebody that has a just a little grid work in there. It's really just not terribly important. The important thing is the hole and being able to see that the laser's on the hole. The idea with this is you mount this into your eyepiece, take your eyepiece out, mount this in the eyepiece in the Newtonian, turn the laser on. Your first step is to get the laser to hit the primary mirror in the center. And most mirrors will have a mark that mark the center. So you want to get the laser hitting the center. And then your next task, once you adjust your secondary mirror to get that done, your next task is to have the laser come back to the secondary and back into the laser right down the hole it came out of. So that's the technique involved. We're not going to go through that part of it anymore. The important thing is that only works if this is collimated. And collimation of this laser basically means that the laser is coming out of the middle of this device. If it's not, your collimation can't ever work. I don't know if I can do this with my hands, but we got the laser. We've got laser coming straight out of the object this way. You can imagine if it's coming out at an angle like this, you're never going to get that laser to come bouncing right back into the spot that it came into. So this has to be aligned first. Now I do this at home. This is my own, oddly enough and embarrassingly enough, when I checked it after doing this one, I found that mine was off. But what I do is I put these into a lathe, metal lathe, and spin them. I put an indicator on the end so that I can tell that it's not sitting in my lathe going like this. But I basically spin this so that it's rotating around its middle. And I shine the laser on a wall. If I were being really good at it, I would bounce that laser back and forth a few times, or a nice far wall like this one, to get a nice long baseline. And as I rotate it, I'm going to look for this laser making a hole on my wall. If it does so, I'm going to try and rotate it gently by hand. And then all of these lasers will have 3 little adjustment screws. Some of them have more than that. But there's an adjustment screw right on the side here, and one 120 degrees away over here, and another one over here. Now, the gentleman who gave me this particular laser said he couldn't get it to move. And I thought that there might have been something odd going on in here. Well, actually ends up that this one's kind of better than mine. And it just needed a little more power. So you tend to want to be fairly gentle with these things. You have the 3 screws, make it, this way, that way, and this way. Your idea is to loosen the screws a little bit and then use one of them to kind of push the laser in a certain direction, tilt the laser, and see what the response is on the wall. And if it was the wrong direction, you back that off and go to the other 2 and work it down. So your idea is to spin this laser and get it to the point where that laser dot on the wall doesn't move, or at least doesn't move very much. Now, most people probably don't have a lathe. So as a quick mock-up, I made myself one of these. It's just a block of wood. In this case, it's 2 blocks of wood that I glued together to make it thicker, that have a 2-inch and a 1 1/4 inch hole. Now, it's actually better if I was able to cut this in a V, and have just a V position that I can sit this in. But I couldn't do that fast enough. So I drilled the holes, they were quicker. The idea here is to insert the laser in through the hole, and that's why this is thick, is to get that laser all the way in there. And what I found is that my 1.25" hole is too precisely 1.25". It's very hard to rotate. But what you want to do here is, I can't show this on Zoom very well because the deck is below the image here. But you want to place this on a table that's nice and flat and stable. I've actually had planned to put a platform underneath here that was much wider than this, because this is not terribly firm when you do sit it on a table surface. But get this sitting on a table surface nice and firmly, and then rotate your laser in here so that you can observe it at a distant wall. Now, I found that this hole, my 1.25" hole, was very, very tight. So I took my 2-inch adapter, put that tightly into the 2-inch hole, put the laser into the 2-inch adapter. It spins very nicely now. The 2-inch adapter, you can turn around and look at the back wall. You'll get an idea how poor this is. Whoops, I got to turn it on bright. Where is it? There it is. Okay, if you look at the door, I'm going to sit this. Zoom folks won't be able to see this, but the in-house people will. If I put it on there and get it kind of stable, I can just move the laser in there. It's pretty sloppy, but if I'm careful with it, I can keep it firmly up there. I can rotate it, and this thing's not moving at that distance. It's not, except for I'm holding the block at an angle, but it's just moving just the tiniest little bit. Now, this is when I started this, this laser was making about a 2.5-inch circle at 3 feet. So it was pretty bad, but I got it working for the guy. I was supposed to give it back to him tonight, but he didn't make it. But the idea there is you want to trust your test equipment, but your test equipment's got to be right. So before you do collimations, make sure your laser's in good shape. With that, I'll give it to Steve and go let Tim in through the door. Thank you.
I've got some questions about that. Steve, I'm sure you can answer.
Yeah, give it to me in a minute.
No, Steve can answer about collimation. How often do you have to do this?
Collimating the laser or collimating the scope?
Collimating your telescope.
So if it's a Newtonian, I usually collimate it every single time I bring it out. They tend to be a little more sensitive to vibration. Also, the bigger the mirror, you tend to have a little more, it's moving around more weight when you're bouncing it around in the car. If you're just pier mounted, you probably can get away with quite a bit longer. But I usually find that anytime I bring it up to the star parties, I have to do just not a heavy duty tuning. It's just a little bit out of whack. So I usually do it every time. It only takes a minute or two. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So everybody should have a laser collimator to let them.
Yeah, the laser are the easiest. You can do it without a laser too, using reflections of reflections, and they're that takes a little more training to get used to like what you're actually looking at. So the laser tends to be the simplest for people for sure.
Okay. Well, I don't want to scare people away about all of the starting with a technical topic.
Right.
This is Telescopes 101, not 301.
Right.
So,
yeah, and it's different. There's another kind of collimation for another type of scope called the Schmidt-Cassegrain. You don't use a laser for that. You can, but they're very expensive set of lasers for that. Most people just use a star for that. It's actually very cheap, very quick and easy for that as well. But yeah, the collimation is not, it sounds complicated at first, and everybody's always worried that they're going to make it worse than they are going to make it better if they haven't done it before. But once you do it once or twice, it's quick.
But if you don't have a collimator and you have a new telescope, you can still use that telescope. It may not be optimal, and that's something else to add to it, but it's not going to keep you from using the telescope. Is that right?
Right, that's correct. And some telescopes do come with the non-laser version of the collimator.
Okay.
But yeah, you can usually still use it out of the box. You can still get a rough guide on having it proper.
And there are some telescopes that do not need to be collimated. Is that
also true? Yep. If you get a refractor where their lenses, they're cemented in place inside the tube, they never really move unless you drop the thing. Or something, if you're too rough with it like that. But in general, for the life of the refractor, you can pretty much not have to.
What about a Mac?
The Macs you have to collimate just like you do the Schmidt-Cassegrains. They're a little more difficult to collimate. I wouldn't suggest a Mac for a beginner. They're more expensive, they're more difficult to collimate, but they are a nice you know, for planetary and certain other things, they're very nice
Okay.
scopes.